Hey folks, Eric Beatty here with a brand new interview video I'm been looking forward to for quite some time now. I've got a special guest today is Mr. Nick Minnion from certain sites as teachguitar.com and the secretguitarteacher.com, and I've got links available for you below on those. I've got Mr. Nick Minnion on the line with me. Unfortunately, he can't be with me in video in person, so I've got kind of like a little picture up here to the side. He's calling all the way from the UK, and so he's calling me via telephone, which I have right here in front of me, and hopefully you can hear everything that's going to transpire here. So I'm going to get started with the interview today. It's just the basic questions I always go over, but from a different person's perspective. In this case, it'd be Nick. So Nick, tell us a little bit about yourself before I get started. How you got started playing guitar, and how your business has progressed. Just some general info about yourself.
Okay, I have to put you right on a small detail there in your intro, because although I am originally from the UK, I actually live in France.
Oh, I did not know that.
I know for Americans that's kind of like pretty much the same thing. It's that place over the other side of the water. But for us, France is a pretty foreign country compared to to England, which is where I'm from.
Okay. I didn't know you lived in France.
Say again?
I said I didn't know you lived in France.
Yeah, I live in the Alps, in the mountains.
Okay.
Kind of moved here a couple of years ago. The move was really made possible by retiring from teaching guitar on a one-to-one basis and setting myself up to make a living entirely from the internet.
Okay. So, yeah.
To get back to your question, I've been playing guitar 48 years, I've worked out. Ever since I was 8 years old. I'm 56 now, so since I was 8 years old, that's when I first picked up a guitar.
That's amazing. You've got quite a few years on me as far as experience goes.
Yeah, I sometimes think, though, that one of the reasons I enjoy teaching guitar is because I've learned very slowly. So there are many people who've been playing for maybe 6 or 7 years who would run rings around me on a guitar, but perhaps wouldn't have quite the depth of knowledge.
Okay.
And also I think when you're teaching guitar, it helps to kind of learn slowly and observe the process as you've gone along.
Exactly. So many people seem like they're impatient to learn. They want to learn everything right now, and they don't understand that it takes quite a long process to learn how to play guitar correctly. Otherwise, if you rush into it, you develop mistakes that are easy to or hard to get rid of later on down the road when you do finally get lessons or whatever. And it just makes the whole process a lot easier if you just take it step by step and don't rush things.
Absolutely. It helps to put down roots.
Yes. Very good. So you mentioned something about you retired from teaching guitar. How long were you teaching guitar at the time when you retired?
That's kind of a long story. I gave my first guitar lesson when I was 15 years old, just because a local head teacher at the primary school asked me to stand in for somebody who'd been running classes for his kids in the school and then had suddenly disappeared. So he had a group of about 10 kids all trying to learn to play guitar and nobody to teach them. And because he knew I played guitar, he just asked if I'd take over temporarily. And I ended up doing that for about a year, which at the age of 15 was great for my confidence. And I really enjoyed doing it. So that's when I started. Then after I left home, aged about 18, I did the odd bit of guitar teaching now and then, just to sort money in the evenings. I might have done 6 or 7 lessons a week or something, no more than that really. And it's very strange, or it seems a very strange thing to me now, but it was many years before it occurred to me that you could do it full time. It actually just never occurred to me that it could be a full-time job.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until the early 1990s that I started teaching full-time, and that was out of necessity. During financial hard times, I just had to do whatever came my way. And again, somebody just asked me to teach their kid, and I started, and they told their mate, and then a couple more kids came along, and after a while, I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, what's to stop me advertising and building a full-time guitar teaching practice? And within a year or so, I had that up and running, and I've been living from it ever since.
Awesome. Okay, I'm typing some notes as I go along. That way I can add these later. Some of those questions. I'm probably not going to get to all these today, but you're kind of answering several in once, and that's great.
Say that last bit again.
I said you're kind of answering several questions at once, so that kind of saves me a little bit of time.
So as always, I've already gone off script.
No. That's good. That allows me from. Usually my interview videos, they seem to last a little bit longer than I need them to. And so I'm going to try to wing it a little bit today, going along with...
Well, I'm a compulsive improviser, whether I'm playing guitar or talking. So no worries.
That's awesome. And I want to mention, too, to the audience here watching that this is going to come out later, obviously, but I want to mention that Nick is the guy that encouraged me the most and is my main inspiration when it comes to teaching guitar. I had played guitar forever and just thought, I want to share my gift with the world and with people. Started out on YouTube, and that was easy because there was no one-on-one thing. And then eventually, back in around 2012 or somewhere around in there, Nick really gave me that boost of confidence that I needed and provided me with some of his resources, to which I actually wrote the dictionary to one of his ebooks, which we'll get to in a little while, one of the ebooks that he created, which are awesome, by the way. But Nick actually got me started in teaching guitar, and I owe a lot to Nick. And this is the first time, really, that I'm talking in a conversation with him. We have corresponded through email over the years, but this is the first time I'm getting to talk to you, Nick.
Yeah, it's a fantastic thing about the internet that we can follow each other's progress from 3,000 or 4,000 miles away. And you get to feel you begin to know somebody and you haven't even spoken to them. So this is quite strange talking to you for the first time.
Yeah, really, if it weren't for you, I would not have the courage. You're one of the big factors that played out in me teaching guitar for full time when I got laid off my job back in 2012, and also creating the 2 courses that I've got available right now. You're one of the big catalysts for that, and I really appreciate it.
It became kind of a life mission for me to help people who I felt had the potential to be doing something creative, like teaching guitar, instead of doing jobs that perhaps there were hundreds of other people that could do just as happily and just as well. I think it's a very common thing for people to get stuck in the work they do, and if their heart and soul aren't in it, then personally I see it as a real shame. And okay, I know everyone's situation is different, and many people are very happy to be in any kind of work, but if you've got what it takes to set yourself free from that and get into more creative work, then in my view the world needs the more self-responsible and self-creative people there are out there, creating their own work, creating their own small businesses, doing exactly what you've done, created these courses and, really put yourself out there. I see that as a very, very positive thing on every level. I think it's great for you as an individual. It probably makes you an easier person to be around for your friends and family. And at the end of the day, like you say, you're giving a gift. You're sharing something precious that you have with other people. And, it's what you often hear called a win-win situation. So,
Yeah.
I'm very, very pleased to have played a small part in that. And I think I know for certain it took a lot of courage on your part as well, and that's got to be acknowledged.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of people other than me. I mean, you've been teaching guitar for years and have helped tons of other people, no doubt. And everybody's probably taken a different path altogether. Some people probably gone on to do some of the stuff that I've done, create their own materials and things like that. But it's amazing to see how one person can affect the lives of so many. And I understand where you're coming from because I get comments all the time on my videos as a result of putting my best foot forward and getting myself out there, that people really see what I do as something that adds value to their life. And it just, when that first happened, it's like it just blows you away that people find value in something that you do, but they actually do.
Absolutely. And what never ceased to amaze me as a guitar teacher is the part that music plays in people's lives. And when I'm training other guitar teachers, as I've done a fair bit of also, I always say to them, never underestimate the value of what you're helping somebody achieve when you're helping them to learn a musical instrument. On the face of it, it's just about playing a few tunes, but actually there are layers and layers of work that you're doing with that person along the lines of raising their self-esteem and their own sense of being able to create and master something. And very often the guitar can be the only thing in their lives that they're feeling like that about. And it can be a massive thing. And one of the things you have to watch as a guitar teacher is to get a little bit casual about that sometimes. And once or twice in the past, I've perhaps made the mistake of saying to somebody, hey, I think you're ready to go off out into the world and play guitar now. I don't think I can teach you anymore. And you can watch them break down on the spot because you haven't really spotted that you're giving them a lot more than just guitar lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what makes the job, from my perspective, one of the best jobs in the world, because you are working on so many levels. And as I say, you make contact with people that remember you 30 or 40 years later. I can attest to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes a huge difference, and it's awesome. Now, getting back to your teaching days, I think when I talked to you in the past that you had mentioned that you actually started out and then you began hiring a staff and then you ended up having your own complete studio. Is that correct?
Yeah, one thing led to another, really. Teaching from home is great when you're doing 2 or 3 lessons a day, but when it becomes more like 6 or 8 lessons a day and you've got a young family growing up, it can become a bit problematic. So when I hit that stage, I started looking for premises. I started looking for a little studio in my local town, which at that time was Brighton on the south coast of England. And I found a little basement room, which I paid, I think, £30 a week. What's that, about $40 or $50 a week rental for? And as soon as I was hiring this space, which was great, I'd set it up as a nice little teaching studio. I used it for recording and for band rehearsals and all kinds of things as well, so I'd soundproofed it. But then I was thinking, well, half the time I'm not here, and somebody else could be here using this space. So initially I just hired one other guy to come in and use the space and teach when I wasn't there. And then a couple of other little studios next door became available, so I thought, well, I'll take those on as well, and hired a few more people. And to cut a long story short, within a couple of years, we'd moved into a building with 8 soundproof studios, and I had 20 tutors working for me, teaching everything from guitar to trombone, saxophone, singing, anything to do with music, really. And we were training bands, whole bands of kids to play together as bands. And it was, a real vibrant little business.
So it grew from something that an idea that you had and that, you come up with, but you had to start somewhere, right?
Well, I always say, if you're going to run your own business, at the heart of it, you have to have a viable proposition. There are different books kind of name these different things. Some people call them money-making machines.
Yeah.
Quite simply, you have to have something that you can do that brings you more money in, i.e. it's of more value to your customers than it costs you to produce. If you get something like that, your next step is, can you replicate it? Can you copy it many times over? And very often, the traditional way of doing that is to hire other people to repeat or duplicate pretty much what you've done yourself. Now, I did that out there in the real world for a while. Great fun, and I really enjoyed it and everything, but I have to be honest, it was also extremely hard work, and at the end of the day, I had to accept the fact that although I was having the pleasure of helping a lot of other people make a living from doing this, it wasn't really getting me any further forward, and I could see a time when I wouldn't be able to keep up with it in terms of the energy required. Yeah. And at that point I started, that kind of coincided with the evolution of the internet and the World Wide Web, and I began to see how that was a different method for duplicating or replicating something you do in a very powerful way and at very low cost. So I began to see, sort of looking ahead to retirement or early retirement, that was probably more the way to go than trying to actually create something out there in the physical universe.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people think, you hear all these internet marketers talking about how everything's automated, everything's this and everything's that. But like you mentioned, one key word there, you've got to put the work in. You've got to put the hard work in. Then you can automate it and systemize it and things like that. But you initially have to create the initial product. Now, when it comes to starting your own business and where you started from private teaching guitar to a studio to hiring people, see, for me that was a hard thing to try to hire other people to do things that I could do myself. I know that you have to grow, but for you, what were some of the fears that you had? Did you have any worries at all about how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to pay my employees? What are some of those things that you might have went through when you was initially starting up and as you progressed?
Well, I had the advantage that I had run a number of small businesses before. I've spent more of my life as a self-employed individual than I have in employment. So running a business wasn't new to me. And I've been involved in various different businesses of different sizes and different levels of success and failure. And of course the failure is the thing you learn most from. So I made sure I had plenty of those. I think one of the big lessons you learn as you go along is to grow. Don't try and force things to grow. Try and look at what the natural next step is, the obvious next step. If you watch how plants grow and how forests grow and how animals grow and how humans grow, it's a natural process. It's to do with using what resources are already freely available to you and repackaging those, managing those in such a way as to create more resources, and I think that was the big lesson. Every time I tried to make something grow faster than it was perhaps natural for it to do so, I came unstuck sooner or later. And a lot of my early business has suffered from, sometimes it's called over-expansion, sometimes it's called under-financing, but really I would sort of label both those phenomena as manifestations of trying to make a business grow faster than its natural rate. Taking people on is always a responsibility. I've always been incredibly choosy about people. I've always been very careful to select people with a high level of individual responsibility. I've been very lucky to have worked with some great people over the years. Always fostered a good team spirit. That's vital. And always done my best to pay people both in terms of finance, in wages or whatever remuneration you're giving them, as well as in terms of support at every level. Pay people as much as you possibly can and make people feel valued and valuable. And if you don't genuinely feel that they're valued and valuable, well, then part company with them in the nicest way possible as soon as possible. Don't hang on to people who aren't fitting in, and pulling their weight. You have to be pretty cut and dried about that.
Yeah, that's a good advice. I'm right now starting to learn through some of the books that I'm reading about treating your employees, and giving them support, like you mentioned, and things like that. And it's interesting that you mentioned about not forcing things to grow, especially since we talked earlier about people who want to learn the guitar. They try to force that process. They try to make it, right now, I want it right now. But not only those people have to kind of, let it, grow naturally. Entrepreneurs as well, we can't force things. I mean, if you think about it, all of life is like that. Like you said, it's in nature. It's all around us. And the more we try to force it, something that, it's kind of like the whole proverb about what happens when an immovable force meets I forgot how the whole thing goes, but it talks about how you meet an immovable force and then another word for immovable force, and you try to get those together and it doesn't work. So you have to trust.
That's another very good lesson. Don't fight battles that you don't have to fight.
Yeah.
A lot of people by nature are quite antagonistic, and they can make real problems in business by seeking for fights and seeking for struggle. And perhaps, one of the things I've tried to do is not even think in terms of competition. For me, I think I've been very lucky that all the businesses I've been involved in have been very personal. They've been businesses where I could really express myself. And at the end of the day, I'm able to express myself better than anybody else can.
Yeah.
And that's true of every individual. Nobody can be you better than you can. So if you're out there putting your personality, your passion, your life force really into what you're doing, you don't have any competition. You're never going to have any competition. Nobody's going to be able to actually do that better than you. And where people go wrong, in my view, is they try too hard to do it like somebody else. They're trying to follow a role model. They're trying to, they're trying to be Warren Buffett or, I don't know, what other examples have you got over there of big businessmen? He's the only one I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us a little bit about, we've moved from the private teaching to the studio, and you mentioned that you went from there to basically online. Now, your first website that I'm aware of is the only one I could really find, and today there's a few other ones, but this is the one I always keep coming back to, who kind of focused on the guitar teacher, not necessarily there's millions of websites out there, how to play guitar or how to, learn guitar. But it was so hard when I first found you, in the late 90s, to find a resource that helped people learn how to teach guitar. And so let's talk a bit about that first website and the progression from there to your new website. Some things you learned along the way, some mistakes you might have made with the first one that you corrected in the second one. let's talk about, some of the things that you have out there to offer. And, it's just amazing, like I said, that obviously you had that idea and it worked out for you to help other people learn how to teach and not just play.
Yeah, I think following on from what I said earlier about having been rather late in my own development to catch on to the idea that one could make a full-time living from teaching guitar, it occurred to me that there were probably quite a few other people around who could be teaching guitar for a living instead of doing a boring day job. And that became my sort of mission, really, was to, I can't remember the exact wording I used to use, but helping cure people of their day job. I think that was the line. So, in a nutshell, this all started really as the internet was in its infancy. I had this idea. Initially, I just wrote it up as a kind of report, which I sold by mail order in the back, adverts in the back of magazines and things. Mm-hmm. And it was simply a little how to do it booklet. It was a booklet called How to Make a Living Teaching Guitar. And I sold it through guitar magazines. Then, as the internet came along, it occurred to me that I could build a website based on this idea and maybe sell this booklet as an e-book. And that was, I was very lucky because it was in the early days when domain names were still quite easy to get. And I managed to get the domain name teachguitar.com, which I've since had offers of over $10,000 for as a domain name,
Yeah.
I was very, very lucky to get that. And I won't ever let it go, just in case there's anyone who's got any ideas.
Yeah.
So teachguitar.com simply became my first website and was really just focused on providing free resources for anyone who wanted to set up and succeed as a guitar teacher. And to sort of make the site pay, I sold the ebook, How to Make a Living Teaching Guitar. That gradually gained in popularity. And I wrote a second ebook called 50 Flexible Lesson Plans for Guitar Teachers. And that has actually outsold the first ebook over the years. That's been the top seller. And eventually I added a third ebook called How to Increase Your Income from Guitar Teaching, which was more focused on, really thinking of your guitar teaching practice as a small business. Have to say, surprisingly, from my perspective, that's the least successful in terms of sales. Not at all sure why, but it's never caught on like the other two books have. Maybe because there are many, many books out there on how to make more money doing what you do. So maybe there's an example of being, falling into the trap of trying to compete, rather than just, the other books are very much more my sort of self-expression.
Yeah. My personal favorite is the last one. I learned so much about running a business and about scheduling and about time management and things like that. And I really enjoy the last one for sure.
Yeah.
And I have links below.
You have a good, have a very business-like mindset about your guitar teaching. It's surprising how many guitar teachers still balk at the idea of thinking like a businessman. Businessmen have a bad name amongst artists. A lot of artists think that it's somehow, I don't know, uncreative to think too much about money or something. I don't know. There's a little bit of a standoff between the two subjects, don't you think?
Yeah. So you started out with ebooks online, which is an awesome way to start out. I've heard from many people you can at least create an ebook and get that out there, and start making money online through that if you want to do something you create. And that's what you've done with teachguitar.com and those 3 ebooks. I've got links for everybody watching. I'll have links below to that website that you can go access those. Now, and a cool known fact, your brother actually did all the drawings and illustrations for that website and for your books, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I'm very lucky. And my older brother John is a full-time, or was a full-time caricaturist. He has a successful career as a graphic artist. He's retired now. He's about 8 years older than me. But he very kindly sort of helped with a lot of the graphic work. And then the website went through 3 different incarnations, really. The first one I literally wrote myself from scratch in just plain old HTML. In retrospect, it was pretty awful, but it was good enough to get the first few books sold and prove the concept. So then I produced the second website, which my brother John helped me with. That was fine, but really it still had a lot of problems with the sort of technical side of things, the navigation side of things. And as the business grew, it proved to not really be able to stand the sort of changes that growth imposes on a website. So at that point, I got in touch with a guy who lives in London called Jules, who completely redesigned the whole site from the bottom up and has made it so that it can effectively tolerate any amount of expansion. And he managed to integrate my brother's drawings in it and keep it looking unique. So I think it's very important because there's so many websites that look like so many other websites that simply just don't stand out from the crowd. So I wanted to maintain its slightly kind of folksy feel. But Jules has been working with me ever since, and basically these days takes care of all the technical side of both my websites.
Well, that's really good. I mean, and for those watching too, it's the ebooks are not the only thing that you have available there. There are tons of free resources that Nick has on that website that are just, you can download lesson samples, you can download, all kinds of PDFs and all kinds of things that Nick has made available. So there's much more available there. I mean, I go there, every now and then to just check out what's new and what, if I need an idea for a lesson or something like that, or if I myself as a teacher am struggling with how to teach somebody something, chances are I can find it there, because you've got resources for guitar teachers, for guitar students, for just about everything. Music theory, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff there on that website. So now let's talk about the transition from this first website into the next website. What sort of things have you learned from your first website that you applied to your next website to make the process a lot smoother? And what kind of website is your new website?
Yeah, quite simply, really, teachguitar.com to this day still runs along very nicely, and it's a nice little secondary business, really. I felt it was never, because it's such a niche marketplace. Really, as you say, it's aimed at people who want to be guitar teachers or who are guitar teachers and want to improve what they're doing. I sort of felt it had its limits in terms of how far I was able to push that and make it grow, and I didn't see it ever looking after my retirement for me. So, not ever having sort of been sensible enough to put money aside in the pension fund as I've gone along. As you hit your 50s, you start to think more about, looking after yourself in your old age. And I started to think, well, is there a website I could create that is more likely to do that job, So I had to think, well, there aren't maybe maybe there are only sort of tens of thousands of people in the world who want to be guitar teachers, but there are literally millions who want to be guitar players.
Mm-hmm.
So the obvious thing for me to do was to create a website to reach would-be guitar players. And again, obviously in that area there are many, many people really well set up. And I looked at a lot of the websites out there. And again, I made a conscious decision that I wouldn't try and compete with them because they had about 10 years start on me, and they also had a very much higher level of capitalization behind them, quite clearly. So I decided to keep it very personal. Rather than hire lots of different teachers, I decided, certainly for the time being, to just stick to lessons that I create myself. And I decided to use YouTube as my main sort of contact point with the marketplace. So I started out just putting lots and lots of guitar lessons on YouTube, and that to this day is how I get the bulk of my site visitors is directly from YouTube. And I've now over 5 million viewers on YouTube.
Wow.
Viewings of my videos, and it's still growing. So there's also, subsidiary income from the advertising that you can set up on YouTube as well. That makes a nice little extra line of income.
Yeah.
And then, the website, secretguitarteacher.com, basically took everything I'd learned over years and years of teaching guitar and put it into video formats, backed up with printouts and audio recordings. And it's an ongoing thing. Each year I put up 2 or 3 more courses, pretty much in response to what people write in and ask for. I give everybody full email support, so I'm in direct contact with many of the site members. And I've now got over 400 regular site members who subscribe on a monthly basis or an annual basis. And on top of that, I sell downloadable courses to people who don't have permanent access to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So I get quite a bit of revenue from that as well. And it has been, unbelievably successful from my point of view. A much better project than I ever imagined it would be. And on the strength of it, I've been able to decide where I want to live in the world, because I think you're living from the internet means you can live anywhere where you've got an internet connection.
Yeah.
Hence, I chose to come and live here in France, where I look out of my window at mountains and fields and beautiful things. And that for me is the biggest part of the payoff, really, that freedom, and as well as the pleasure of actually running the business itself, which is a genuine thing I enjoy doing every day of my life.
That's so important to enjoy and to love what you do. Now, the Secret Guitar Teacher website, with both those websites I have links below for, but that website is a little bit different because it's a little more than just selling products. It's a membership site, so people pay to have access to all the videos, not just one course, not just this and that, but I mean every single video you have available. They pay to have access to that. I have myself been thinking about doing that because I've got over 500 videos on YouTube, which I recently finally got to 500 videos, and I'm sitting here going, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube now. I really need to start focusing on some other kind of, site or product or something, because there's plenty there to keep, my YouTube people busy for right now while I work on other things. So tell us a little bit about the advantages, maybe even the differences of selling products versus having a membership site where the revenue kind of keeps recurring.
I started out just with the membership idea, but pretty soon I began to get inquiries from people saying, I can't be online all the time. I have to go down to my local cafe to connect to the internet. So is there any way I can download your videos onto my computer, or of course now it's not just computer, it's tablet, mobile phone, who knows what's next, maybe wristwatch.
Yeah.
You know, you have to keep up with the changing market in that respect. But people who wanted to download permanent copies. So I simply repackaged the videos and support materials that I had already created and made them available as downloadable packages. And Jules, my technical agent, he set up a whole section of the site, the download depot, where all those courses are available as discrete packages, really. People simply choose the course they want to do, make a payment, a one-off payment, and then they get access to the download site, which is permanent, that access. They could download a copy of that for every device that they own, basically. I wouldn't say it's the most high security way of selling things, but that's another issue. But basically, I would say roughly 50-50 at the moment. I get income from the downloadables and income from the memberships. It was a good step to take.
Yeah. I've definitely heard a lot about, that making a big difference. Now, you said your website, the web developer does all the, integration and everything, but do you by chance know what he uses for integrating the membership aspect of the website? I know there's various plugins and things like that. What does he use?
Yeah, I mean, he's mainly a PHP man. So it's all PHP scripts. But also we use ClickBank, basically as our e-commerce link, and also for affiliates. And ClickBank has more and more kind of integration that you can plug into. We're not as automated as we could be. I'm actually not a big fan of over-automation. I like to keep a degree of personal control. I like my customers to know that there are real people in charge of the site. I think there's nothing more dispiriting than trying to communicate with a website and getting nothing but autoresponders come back to you. So we avoid getting too automatic. We use automation for the mundane things, but we also make sure that there's always human interaction available, especially when people have any problems, either technical problems, they can get directly in touch with Jules, or for musical problems, get directly in touch with me by email.
Okay. That's awesome. Let me scroll down here. There's obviously a lot of stuff that we're leaving out, which is fine. I'm realizing that some of these questions don't really apply to what we're talking about, so I'm just going to scroll down here and see exactly what we've got. I've got one here that, let's see, might be a good one. What sort of, obviously you're not, teaching students anymore privately. That's what the website's for. And so what kind of practice regimen do you have for yourself? What do you do as far as guitar? What kind of practice schedule do you have? Or do you even practice that much anymore?
Yeah. I just find, all my guitars are within arm's reach, pretty much. And whatever I'm working on, there's always something I need to improve about my playing. If I'm about to make a video, the latest videos I'm making are more to do with jazz guitar. And that's an area that, I'm very much a learner in myself. So every step of the way, I'm having to really make sure that my own approach to playing is up to scratch in order to make plausible demonstrations of what I do. So, I've just been spending the last couple of days trying to get the timing right on the melody of Take the A Train.
Yeah.
Which for a lot of people is going to be pretty tricky. That's quite a challenge to teach it. But it's even more of a challenge if you haven't actually quite got it right yourself to start with. So, I always find there's something in what I'm teaching that's also stretching me. On top of that, I play in a band, and we've got more gigs coming up, so I'm having to prepare for those. So I tend to practice almost entirely according to the needs of the moment. Whatever challenges I see ahead, either in a video I'm making or a gig I'm going to perform on or a recording I'm going to make, then I practice whatever I need to smarten up on at that time to do a good job of whatever it is I've got coming along. Really.
Yeah.
So it's fairly haphazard. I wouldn't say I've ever been one to stick to a strict practice regime.
Okay.
I think those suit some people, but I've always been one to just do what seems most needed in the moment, really.
Okay. Let's see. I've eliminated a lot of these questions here, which is, like I said, we've already answered a bunch of these. We're getting up to about 45 minutes. How are you on time, Nick?
I'm all right. Yeah. I mean, let's quite happy to go on for another 10 minutes if that suits you.
Okay.
Whatever you like.
I'll try to make this as quick as possible. Really appreciate your time. By the way, everybody, what time is it where you're at, Nick?
It's about 10 to 10.
10 till 10 in the p.m.
In the evening. Yeah.
So I don't want to keep them up too late. So I can tell this is more going to be about entrepreneurial stuff than it is about how to just start playing guitar and all that stuff. We've already covered a lot of that. So I think I'm going to stick to mainly entrepreneur-related questions because that's really what I'm interested in today. One of those is, let's see here. Let me go back here and delete that right there. What motivates you, and this is something I struggle with from time to time, what motivates you to keep creating videos and keep creating courses and products and things like that? Because sometimes it just seems overwhelming with all the work that needs to be done. With me, I've got two main projects or products, and I'm realizing that I need to do little bitty products after this because it's taking so long to get one of them done because it's a 6 video course. And I'm going to stick to smaller things probably from now on because it'll be easier to release it. But sometimes it gets overwhelming and, at the tasks that are ahead of you. What motivates you to keep going?
That's a good question. I think it's simply, there's two things that I simply love doing, always have done, and it doesn't matter what area of life we're talking about. The two things I love most are learning and creating.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they go very much hand in hand. If you're creating, you can't help but learn.
Yeah.
And I think it's a natural thing when you learn to want to do something with what you've learned, and that doing inevitably is going to involve some sort of creativity of some sort. So I'd say it's a desire to create and it's a desire to learn and to move into new areas all the time, just explore new areas.
Yeah.
So for me, learning and teaching are two sides of the same thing. And my learning is my teaching, and my teaching is my learning.
Yeah. It's a good way to think about it. I'm the same way. I crave to learn new things, and not only that, I crave after I've learned them to share them with other people. So I'm always kind of finding new ways to do that. I never thought about that though. That's an interesting way to kind of put things in perspective, and instead of seeing things as work and tasks that need to be done, do what you love to do and try to find a way to work that into what you're doing. Because that's originally why we start on our own anyway, is to do what we love to do, and it just becomes this whole mess of I've got to get this done, I've got to get that done, and we lose sight of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is part of the art of running a business, is to keep it fun for yourself. It's very easy. A great example is when back in the 1980s, you may know I got involved in manufacturing hang gliders and ultralight aircraft. And I got into that that because I loved flying, and I learned to fly hang gliders, and I learned to build them. And we built them, and we took them out, and we flew them. And then we got very successful, and we sold lots of them, and we hired lots of people. And before I knew it, I was coming to work each day and sitting at a desk, ringing up the bank manager and the creditors and arranging finance and selling. And I was paying people to go out and do the flying. And one day I woke up and realised this wasn't what I planned at all, you know. So I think since then I promised myself never to allow any business I run to become a chore or become like work. I don't think of it as work. I tell my wife it's work, but she knows that she knows I don't really think of it as work.
Yeah. So speaking, and you said hang gliders. Aren't you a pilot? Don't you fly airplanes?
Yeah, well, I was a Microlight Test pilot. A Microlight's a British word for what the Americans call an ultralight. It's just a tiny aeroplane.
Okay.
Basically, a very lightweight aeroplane.
Okay. So do you own it?
And I used to test fly. I used to own a manufacturing company together with a guy who did all the design work. He was the clever one, and he. Well, maybe he was more clever than me because he used to design these things and then I had to go out and test them.
Yeah.
So,
he was safe on the ground. Yeah.
Say that again?
I said he was safe on the ground.
Yeah, he was a smart cookie. But he was also luckily a very, very, very good designer. And I have to say he never put me at risk. But it was a very dangerous job. At the time, there were other people in my profession who were literally giving their life for their work, who didn't have such good designers as I had.
Yeah. So, do you own your own airplane, or do you still maintain your pilot's license?
Well, it's interesting. I'm one of these people who tends to go through their life in segments, and when I left that line of work back in the late 80s, early 90s, I've been flying once or twice since, but I've left it behind really. I've moved on. It's kind of like I've done that now, and I sort of felt like moving into a different area that I love, which was the music. And really music and teaching have been my focus since then. So although I'm still interested in flying, it's more watching other people doing it these days.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned you said it wasn't work to you earlier, and that your wife knows it's not work, but you tell her it is. That brings me to my next question: how do you balance work, family, and personal / practice time? How do you balance all that? A lot of people want to go after that work-life balance, and some people say there is no such thing. What's your take on balancing all the things related to work and life?
Well, these days it's very easy because I've two kids, but they're now both adults, and they one lives in London and one lives in Hamburg in Germany, and they're clearly living their own lives. I see them from time to time, but I don't have to be responsible for them anymore. So I had relatively few commitments, and again, I come back to this thing of running a business solely on the internet gives you a fantastic amount of freedom. Mm-hmm. So to be absolutely honest with you, I get up in the morning, I check what the weather is for the day, and if it's raining or not particularly interesting weather, I go down to the studio and work. If the weather's nice, I'm more likely to go out and play tennis or go walking in the mountains, or in the winter I go skiing and just have a good time.
Yeah.
So that's my work-life balance. My wife shares my interest with the tennis and the walking and the skiing, so we spend a lot of time on that together, and we spend time working on our house together. We've got a wooden chalet here in the mountains that takes a bit of looking after. So I've been out making hay today because the grass has grown too long. So yeah, I have a very relaxed lifestyle really, and that's again the result of over the years balancing your, being honest with yourself about your real needs. I could work, a 40-hour week and chain myself to my desk every day, and no doubt be making more money. But as far as I'm concerned, most of the things I enjoy doing in life require very little money. So I prefer just to go out and, enjoy the fresh air.
Yeah, that's a good quote there. Be honest about yourself, or be honest with yourself about your real needs. Like you said, a lot of it we lose perspective on, and it just escalates from there. We have to really, like for example, yesterday I've been working Monday and Tuesday trying to get my latest webisode for the Bluegrass Guitar Essentials course released, and I was sat at my desk, hammered away, didn't take many breaks like I probably should have to kind of refresh and reboot. So yesterday I took a reboot day. I took the day off yesterday, and I went to a coffee shop, got me some coffee, went to the library, went to a park and read a little bit, and it was just amazing how much of a difference that made. And by the end of the day, my mood was better, it was improved, and automatically my mind started thinking of new ideas. I started, creating and getting in that creative zone again and getting ready to go back to work, just because I let my brain and everything else rest for a while. And I was ready to hit the office today to do this interview and to do some other things today, and it just made a big difference having that time off.
I think that's vital. I think, and to be honest with you, the older you get, I think the more important that becomes, because there's no point in getting stressed. There's no point in being rich and stressed. You're better off being moderately well off and relaxed.
I like that.
Okay, I think it does depend on your time of life, and I don't know exactly what age you are, but I get that you're probably maybe 20 odd years younger than me at least. And at your time of life, I think you had a lot more energy and a lot more ability to work hard physically, and maybe you should let that loose on the world. But I'd also say watch this thing about, are you genuinely enjoying what you're doing, and are you pacing yourself? Are you leaving a room for fun, really? And like you say, time out. I think anyone would agree with you. Even the top sort of company execs and things need their time out on the golf course or wherever it is they go to get away from their work for a bit.
Yeah, that's vitally important, like you said. I've got about 3 more questions before we go to closing, and then we'll wrap this interview up. And
okay.
So maybe 4 questions. I've seen one I didn't see before. One of the main things about your latest ebook, the last one in the Teach Guitar series, How to Increase Your Income from Guitar Teaching, that I was fascinated with, and I remember corresponding with you about this, and that was how you manage time and your time management. How do you manage time, including the working backwards principle. Could you explain a little bit about that and about how you manage your time during the day? What kind of system do you use? Do you use a planner? What do you find most effective? Explain a little bit further on the working backwards principle.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 things here. Literally, the working, I think it was originally called completion backwards principle.
Okay.
It came from I don't know if you have a band called The Tubes, who brought out an album, I think, way back in the late 70s or early 80s, and it was literally called Completion Backwards Principle. And it's actually a whole album on this subject. And it's the idea that no matter how big or complex a task is, it can always be broken down into smaller tasks, which themselves can be broken down into smaller tasks, etc., until you get down to a task that you feel you can easily accomplish. idea of starting with an end result in mind, analysing what you're going to need to put there to achieve that end result, and then for each of those things, analysing what it is that you've got to do to put those things there. And this process, it's detailed planning, really. It takes a certain mental discipline to apply. But what it means is that you end up with a list of things to do, and each of those things are things that you feel you can do. You have got the resources available, the time, the ability to actually get done. And it's my belief and experience that no matter what task you take on, if you apply that completion backwards principle to it, you can get it done.
So it's kind of like Stephen Covey.
Sorry, say again.
It's kind of like Stephen Covey said in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it was principle number 2. I think it says begin with the end in mind.
Yep.
And
Yep.
So that's exactly what you're talking about.
I should say this principle crops up in many different guises. It's in a lot of the self-help books in one way or another. And there's a whole lot of different ways of looking at it, but it is that that idea of breaking things down until you get to the level of, yeah, I can do that. And then you go into action mode.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing I don't know if I mentioned in that ebook, but something perhaps that I've learned to apply since, and this is as much to do with stress management as anything, is watch the shape of intensity of work when you've got a deadline. Now, supposing you've agreed to get a certain product out by next Saturday afternoon, and you've got, what should we say, 9 days to work on that product. The normal pattern of intensity of work is you start working steadily on it, and then as the deadline approaches, you work more and more intensively until you're flat out burning the midnight oil, Friday night to make sure you get it done in time for Saturday. Now that, if you envisage that as a kind of ramp or a triangle shape, starting at a thin end and working up to a fat end of intensity, if you like.
Okay.
It's the wrong way round. If you manage to invert that, not only do you have a lot less stress in your life, but you also produce better quality results. So one of the things I do is I prioritize according to deadline. And I don't wait for the deadline to creep up on me. I look ahead and say, hang on a minute, there's something I've said I'll do in September. But I'm not going to wait until the beginning of September before I think about it. I'm going to think about it now. I'm going to plan it. And I'm going to do the bulk of the work at this end of the triangle. And so that when September comes along, I can just cruise up to the deadline rather than, have that sense of congestion that you normally get before a deadline.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to kind of turn that triangle around or turn that wedge back to front is a really useful trick.
Okay. Very interesting illustration. I'm a very visual person as well on that, so that's very interesting. Okay, a couple more questions here.
I like visual things, yeah.
Yeah. A couple more questions here. What were the most effective ways you use to build up your clientele, and what are the best ways to maintain a high student retention rate? So building clientele, and for those who may be watching that need to know how to start their own teaching guitar business, what do you recommend as far as building the clientele and keeping student retention?
So this is going back to real-world guitar teaching practice.
Yes.
You're talking about?
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay. I think it's a very interesting thing, but again, this is experienced not just through teaching myself, but also training guitar teachers. The level of student acquisition and retention
Okay.
So if somebody, as happens very frequently, I get emails from people saying they're really struggling to build up a teaching practice, and they want tips on where to advertise and how to advertise and all the rest of it. I do help them with that, but I also point out that that's probably not where the problem is. And what I suggest they do is invest time in becoming a better guitar teacher. Because the more confident you are as a teacher, the more naturally you put yourself out there. And to be absolutely honest, I had a very high level of confidence as a teacher. And for that reason, I almost never had to advertise. I simply, wherever I went, I spoke to people and happened to mention that I teach guitar. And they go, I know a young lad down the road who's looking for a guitar teacher. You know, and even today, I was playing tennis earlier today down at the local club, and somebody walked up to me and said, you know, I've got a guitar student for you. And I said, well, actually, I'm retired, but I can put them onto my website.
Yeah.
So to this day, that sort of level of confidence in what I do still has people walking up to me and saying, can you teach me guitar? So it's an interesting thing, but that is often missed. People slave away with all kinds of marketing tactics and advertising principles and so on, when really what's wrong is underneath it all, they've got doubts about their own confidence level as a teacher. And if they address those, the other side of it tends to take care of itself. And as far as marketing goes, there's nothing better than word of mouth. Simply talking to people and encouraging other people to talk to other people, passing cards around, you know. That's far more cost effective than spending a lot of money on paid advertising.
Yeah, I know you recommend that a lot in your ebooks. That's awesome advice there. As far as, you know, retention rate, and I myself had that issue as far as like my confidence level. It just seemed like it was going to take forever to get me out of that mindset of, well, what I have to offer isn't good. I don't have a degree. I didn't go to college to learn this stuff. I kind of picked it up on my own, and I have experience, but not, you know, a degree. But it was reading those ebooks and, you know, taking your advice that really got me to get out there, and now I'm seeing results from that where people are commenting of how, you know, my teaching makes a difference in their life, and that's worth, you know, a lot.
Yeah.
So the last question, as far as the whole idea of business is related, you was talking about you have a web developer named Jules, I think is his name.
Yeah, Jules, yeah.
What are your recommendations for using virtual assistants, and where do you usually find your virtual assistants at? Is Jules a virtual assistant? Is he somebody you work with one-on-one in person, or is he online?
I didn't know he was one until I saw that phrase in one of your emails,
Yeah.
and I had to look it up, Google it, to see what a virtual assistant was. But yes, I guess he is. I certainly, what did I do? I was thinking, I think the important thing is this: you've got to realise what you're best at. And one of the things I wasn't best at was writing a website. I quite enjoyed it, and I enjoyed learning about it, as I enjoy learning and creating anything. But I had to acknowledge the fact that my time was better focused on teaching guitar and writing about guitar and writing about teaching guitar, and it was better if somebody else did the very time-consuming work of the coding,
Yes.
and the search engine optimization and that whole side of things. And I actually put an advert on a job website offering it as a job, just saying, you know, I was looking for somebody on a self-employed basis, subcontracted basis, to do this website development work. And I had a number of replies, but Jules went to a great deal of trouble of detailing in his reply exactly how he would go about fixing my site. And I found his answers so strong that I instantly took him on. And this was now at least 10 years ago, I think. Probably 8 years, maybe 8 years ago, between 8 and 10 years ago anyway. And we've had a very good working relationship ever since.
So have you had to hire any other virtual assistants for like scheduling or anything like that? Have you ever used Odesk or Elance, a few popular virtual assistants? You haven't? Okay.
I haven't. I sometimes think I ought to take on a marketing assistant.
Uh-huh.
One of the sides of the internet that I cannot get my head around is social networking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aware that a lot of sites use social networking to drive traffic to their websites. And I had a little go at that, but quickly gave up. I just couldn't get the hang of it, to be honest. And to this day, I have a relatively weak and feeble presence on Facebook and Twitter and all those other new things. So other than YouTube, which kind of is trying to become more and more a social network site,
Yeah.
I really don't have much to do with that side of things, and it's probably a missed opportunity. On the other hand, at the moment, I'm quite happy with the level my business runs at. It gives me enough to do, and it brings in enough income. And I don't necessarily want to grow it much bigger. This is another thing you have to be honest about with yourself. Are you trying to build an empire, or are you just trying to have something that purrs along nicely and it keeps you interested, you know?
Yeah.
So if I was all out to build an empire, yes, I probably would take on a virtual assistant on the marketing front. And maybe one day I may need to do that. But right now, I kind of like things at the level they're at.
Okay. I'm typing that in. I'm typing a bunch of your quotes in here so I don't I don't miss out. Give me just a second here.
Say that last again?
I said I'm typing a few of your quotes in here. There's a lot of information I'm typing into the lesson notes or the video notes.
Okay.
All right. So, and okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this thing out. And so this is a little bit more information as far as where you're concerned. For example, what do you have? Actually, this is the last question I forgot I was going to ask. What do you have on your bookshelf as far as like what books do you recommend or have you read for time management, for running a business, for what you've learned in business? Because there are plenty of them out there, like Brian Tracy, Stephen Covey, tons of people out there. I can't even think to name them all. Do you have any certain business-related books like that, and what kinds do you have that you would recommend? Or do you read much?
I used to read an awful lot more of those books than I do these days. Oh dear. I mean, the ones you've mentioned I have read at various points. The 7 Effective Habits, or whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Stephen Covey?
That's Stephen Covey, yes.
Yeah. One of the most interesting books I read recently that you wouldn't necessarily think of in these terms was a biography of Warren Buffett.
Okay.
By Roger Lowenstein.
Okay.
Now, I actually read it because I was interested in learning more about investing, and I don't think there's a better man on the planet to learn about that subject from than Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
But it's a very good story. It's a very interesting story about a very interesting man who perhaps doesn't necessarily get presented as being that interesting. He's normally just seen as a wizard when it comes to financial matters, but there's a great deal of integrity in his story. So that's a book I'd recommend that perhaps wouldn't necessarily get recommended in this context. And at the end of the day, the principles of investing are common to all forms of business. So, there's all sorts of useful knowledge there and just a useful viewpoint.
Yeah.
So that's one that's perhaps a little bit off the beaten track. I'm just
Unreasonable. That's a nice title.
Be Unreasonable. And it's by, I'm just going to get this right. Yeah, it's by Paul Lemberg, Lemberg. And it's called The Unconventional Way to Extraordinary Business Results.
I've found it on Amazon. I'm ahead of you. Be Unreasonable by Paul Lemberg. L-E-M
for mother. B-E-R-G.
That's I haven't seen that one. I'll definitely keep that one in mind.
Yeah, again, it's probably something I picked up in an airport, read on the plane. Very good book, and I like anything that's a little bit out of left field.
Yeah.
You know, all the standard books that you mentioned, yeah, they've all got good stuff in, but it's kind of like that's all the stuff that everybody's doing now.
Yeah.
It's quite nice to read things that give you a little bit of a different view, you know.
Okay.
I'm always up for something that makes me think along different lines to what I'm thinking already. I think there's often a temptation to read books that confirm what you already know.
Oh, that's really good. Did you say it was a temptation to read books you already know?
Well, to read books that contain, that give us a sort of confirmation of what we already know. Because we love to be right, don't we? We love to feel that security of being right. So a lot of the books we tend to get attracted to. We read the spiel on the back cover, and we go, yeah, oh no, he's right, yeah, you know, you sort of feel that whoever wrote this book thinks the way you do, and that's what makes you buy the book.
Exactly.
And of course, in every book, you're always going to get one or two little gems and new ideas, but sometimes it's a good idea to buy a book that doesn't necessarily seem to agree with you.
Yeah.
Something that will shake up your way of thinking.
I never thought of it that way, but now that you said that, I was thinking of tons of books. And almost every book I bought is confirms what I was thinking of, and I buy it because I want to see if there's anything I missed or anything that I haven't thought of, And a lot of our problem too, and I've learned this lately. I've known it for a while, but it's hard to put it in action. But a lot of the problem is we take time to read and absorb information about what needs to be done, but we never take action. Yeah. And that's got to happen in order to get things done. You need to read and then do something, and then you can go back and read some more and then do something. That's the only way to get things done.
Yeah. I tend to turn to these sort of books when I feel stuck. If I feel in a situation where I'm banging my head against the wall and getting nowhere with a particular situation, then sometimes I flick through my bookshelf and just read little bits here, little bits there, in an attempt to just kind of shake myself out of whatever kind of fixed. You know, if you're stuck in something, then it's your own thinking that's got fixed.
Yeah.
And anything that helps unsettle that and shake it up a bit is going to get you out of that stuck situation.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out now. And the last thing is just a bit of information about where we can find you. Like, do you have any upcoming announcements or products or anything like that you want to share? I remember you mentioning something a while back. It's been a while about maybe doing a time management course or a time management product or something. Do you still have that in the works, or do you have anything else in the works?
I was dreading you asking me about that. I have to say, this is like a really weird thing to say, but I haven't had time. I haven't made the time to complete that project.
I knew you were going to say that.
There's an old saying, I can't remember the origin of this saying, but there is a saying that says, we teach best what we most need to learn.
That's good.
So I think my desire to create a time management course is that ultimately that's learn about. No, I have a book that I wrote again some time ago on the subject of time management that has a lot of a lot of stuff that's already out there, but also, as always, for some stuff I put together, some new and original ideas that I've come up with, I think, out of thin air. I sort of feel in this day and age it wouldn't be enough to produce it as a book, but it could be turned into an app. And I did start to write a software program for it, because I quite like programming. The problem with programming is it takes so much time.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the other problem is I'm not that good at it. There's so many people out there who can do it better than me. So really, at the end of the day, I've probably got to find somebody to create this app along the lines that I have in mind.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't say to anybody, hold your breath.
Yeah.
But one day I will bring that out into broad daylight.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I'm working away with the secretguitarteacher.com site. I'm at the moment producing a course called Beginners Jazz Course for Beginners. And it's the idea, I've not seen anything like this before, there may be some things like this out there, but I'm going to try and write a course that somebody pretty much picking up the guitar from day one could learn to play jazz guitar. And most of the time, as you'll probably appreciate, people get into jazz usually after learning rock guitar or blues guitar. It's not often that people get into jazz right from day one.
Yeah.
But I was interested in it as a challenge, so I'm trying to write a course for people who don't necessarily want to spend ages and ages cutting their teeth on jazz, blues, on rock, blues, or even classical guitar. I want to go straight into jazz. So that's my next course. Not a huge market, possibly, but I'm doing it because I love the music, and I love the challenge of writing this particular course. So that'll be out, I should think, within about 3 months' time.
Okay. That's good. That's good. So you're mainly blues and jazz. Is that what you would consider your main genres that you focus on?
Well, I grew up mostly playing, I suppose, mostly blues, some country, some folk music, but blues is probably my first love. And over the years, that's gradually turned more and more to jazz. And these days, I play, in the band I play, I'd say about 70% jazz tunes.
Okay. Jazz is pretty complicated sometimes, but it really makes a big difference once you learn the music theory and things like that behind jazz.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about jazz is it does, I think, engage all your faculties. I think, you have to be a very good field player for jazz, but it also helps a lot if you know your theory.
Yeah.
You have to have reasonably good technique and an extremely solid sense of rhythm. It's very demanding. Musically, it's the most demanding art form, in my view, with a possible exception of sort of top flight classical music, which is out of the question for me because I can never play something the way it's written.
Yeah.
I have an obsession with changing things.
Yeah. So, let's see here. What direction, let's see, you've got your jazz guitar course you just mentioned, and maybe an app down the road, that you may decide to hire a virtual assistant for after all, and what direction are you headed next? Are you just going to continue focusing on your website, the Secret Guitar Teacher website, or do you have something else in the works, or like what direction do you see yourself headed next?
I've always got half a dozen projects that I've started. I mean, I've got a novel that I started writing about a year ago. But again, I wouldn't say to anybody, hold your breath, and that'll be out any minute. I may never complete it, but I've started it, and I've got quite a way with it. I have literally loads of ideas for future projects, and there's no way I'm going to find time to develop them all. But I would say for the moment the secretguitarteacher.com site still has lots and lots of mileage for me. There's lots of stuff I want to put out on that, and I can't really see myself finding time for much else over the foreseeable future. So yeah, that's going to be my main focus, I think, for some time to come.
Okay. All right. So what are the best ways for people to reach you, Nick? So that we're going to go ahead and end on that note. What are the best ways for people to reach you?
I always say that email. I like email because it's as fast as ringing somebody, but it doesn't necessarily interrupt you in what you're doing. You can choose when to respond to it. So I always say to people, email me anytime. You can get me either on nick@teachguitar.com or nick@secretguitarteacher.com.
Okay. Typing that in right now. All right, Nick. So is there anything else that you want to address before we sign off with we stop recording the video and we wrap things up?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Any advice? That's the word I'm trying to think of. Advice for either guitar players or guitar teachers out there you want to leave with them?
Well, I think probably given enough advice for one evening. In the last hour and a half, we've been over quite a lot of stuff there.
All right.
And I think there's a great danger if you start getting me on a general advice pudding, I'll waffle on forever.
Yeah. Well,
keep it passionate and keep it honest. There you go.
Keep it passionate, keep it honest. There you go. Yeah, where you're at right now, it's getting even later, and you could probably get a little loopy over there if I let you keep rambling though. So, so I'm gonna go ahead and just stay on the line, Nick, and I'll say goodbye to you here in a minute. I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap things up on the video here. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this interview with Nick Minnion, one of my great mentors and inspirations in the field of guitar playing, guitar teaching, all things guitar. Please check out his websites. I'll leave links below. And I've got tons of show notes in the bottom and quotes that I've went over with Nick in this. So if you need to know what's going on, you need to refer back to this video, you can by looking at those below. And also there is an Amazon link below where you can get a hold of those books that he mentioned to where you can click on that link and it'll take you straight to Amazon. These are affiliate links. They will... Amazon compensates me, and I receive a commission from Amazon and also from Nick's ClickBank account, and that helps me continue to run the things that I do online on YouTube and on my products and things like that. And I'm fortunate enough to have that kind of a relationship with Nick. I definitely highly recommend everything he's got to offer. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Play some awesome guitar, teach some awesome guitar, and God bless.